We'll start at the beginning. Born 1954, Ontario,
I don't
Canada.
recall.
More or less. Not far from Niagara Falls.
That's right, yeah. Actually quite a bit north, and it was probably close to the Arctic Circle. We moved to Niagara Falls when I was, I think, two and a half. So my first memories are from there.
So the ultimate special effects right there on your doorstep.
Absolutely, and I could hear the thunder of the falls just faintly muted at all times, 24 hours a day. So, you know, the water on the brain thing has always sort of occurred to me as a result of that.
And the water obviously is going to recur during the evening here as well.
Mm-hmm.
So if you were born in 54, it would have been mid-60s or so, probably by the time you were really aware of cinema, is that right?
I think when I was in the third grade or so, when I was, whatever that is, 7-ish, I saw Mysterious Island, a Ray Harryhausen film with fantastic creature effects in it, and really pretty mind-blowing stuff in its day. And I recall that my response to that was to draw. Whenever I saw something that made a strong impression on me, I had to draw, but I wouldn't just draw the thing itself. I would start to embellish and create my own stories around it. And so there were these sort of trigger points in the Harryhausen films, and then that whole slew of sci-fi B-movies that came. And then 2001 was a seminal kind of moment in the late 60s, 68. It was not like anything I'd seen before, and that was the trigger point for me in wanting to emulate technique. So started making little models and lighting them in a very contrasty style against a black background and shooting them with my dad's Super 8 camera, and then a friend of mine had a camera that could do single frame, so then we started doing animation, and one thing sort of led to another, I guess.
Because your father was a scientist, he was an engineer.
Engineer.
And then you studied physics and English, I think at college, although you moved to California.
Physics first and then switched to English.
But do you still think of yourself, do you think you approach things in a scientific way?
I'm pretty analytical. I was thinking about this the other day, and I was sitting at a round table of directors, and everybody said, yeah, you've got to go with your gut, and you've got to have instinct, and your decisions should be instinctual. I actually think that that's a slight simplification of the directing process. I think it's a very analytical process. Even on Avatar, I remember literally having a discussion with the editor saying, okay, look, in this battle sequence, every single time we've improved the battle, we've done it by putting like with like, putting the attack with the attack, the retreat with the retreat, and grouping things that way. Well, that's a very analytical kind of approach, and I realized that it's a balance between analysis and just pure gut instinct.
So you worked as art director for Roger Corman by 1980 on Battle Beyond the Stars, so science fiction already right there from the beginning.
Well, there was a definite, this was right after Star Wars and even before Empire Strikes Back, and Roger was getting in there quickly, striking while the iron was hot. And I got a job as a model builder. I was working in the model shop, and he sort of came in and said, well, you haven't designed the main character's ship, and everybody stood there stunned, and it sort of looked like it was going to be a quick bake-off to see who could come up with design quickly enough. So everybody started drawing something, and I figured it's a Roger Corman film. The main character's ship is a female personality, kind of like HAL 9000, only sexy, right? I thought, okay, I'm going to draw a spaceship with tits. And that was my play. And Roger came through the next day and he said, what is this? I said, it's a spaceship with tits, Roger. And he says, you've got the job. That's how it worked.
But so within just 4 years of that, you were actually directing your own big feature itself.
Things happen fast.
Terminator. Now, is it true that you thought of the theme, or that the theme of Terminator came to you in a dream?
It wasn't so much a theme as a kind of seminal image. I was in Rome. I was broke. I had a high fever, and I was just having these weird dreams. And I had this image of this kind of chrome skeleton, death image coming out of a fire, kind of phoenix-like. And I just got up and sketched it, and then around the nucleus of that, I started to create a story and sort of backfill. Okay, what is it? Where did it come from? Who's it after? And it all sort of fell into place fairly quickly.
Do you think that science fiction should always have underlying ideas, really quite strong themes there? And if so, beyond this idea of rage and getting the world to work your way, what is it in Terminator?
it's not really about machines from the future. It's sort of about our relationship with technology, but it's really kind of about how our human potential for dehumanization ourselves. You see cops as examples, and then the other idea that not to trust technology and even not to trust the fabric of reality, because by the second film you've got this woman who's gone crazy, knowing that the world is a completely fragile place and it's all an illusion. It can all be torn away by this nuclear war. And I was sort of playing with that in the first film as well. That there's this war, it hasn't happened yet, but if you know that, everything changes and all your priorities change. Ideas like that. And I think that comes from being a kid in the 60s. I remember the Cuban Missile Crisis, clearly having these kind of fallout shelter. How to make a fallout shelter in your house, like that would do any good.
So the next place you go is into outer space with Aliens.
Yeah.
Now, of course, Ridley Scott had already done Alien, the first one, and set quite a strong pattern there. So how much of a challenge was it to follow on?
Well, look, it was kind of interesting because everybody was advising me not to do the film because Ridley Scott's a tough act to follow, and it just seemed like if there was anything good in the film that I made, it would be attributed back to the source material, and if there was anything bad, would be attributed to me. And so it seemed like a no-win scenario. But I was such a geek fan still, even at that point, even after having made Terminator, that I just wanted to make the movie. It just seemed really cool. So Sigourney seemed like she would make an amazing kind of evolved Ripley, because I took her forward with the kind of the post-traumatic stress syndrome kind of after effects of her first experience in the script that I wrote, and it just seemed like it was a really cool opportunity, and I didn't want to pass it up.
Do you feel that you took it in a different direction then? I mean, technically as well.
Yeah, clearly. I mean, it was such an amazing film, but I thought, all right, fine. What do I do? I do action. If people know me from Terminator, there's got to be a through line from that. So I wanted to do some really kinetic scenes, and the second you put a kineticism into the backdrop of Ridley's design, now you've got a whole different film. It's going to be much more of a roller coaster ride, much more of an action picture, less of a horror film.
To what extent, with this film and with the next film, The Abyss, did technical possibilities drive what you were trying to do?
I was always trying to push. I mean, look, I read avidly. I was a big fan of all the techniques of prosthetic and appliance makeup and visual effects, and if you could cheat them and use sort of foreground miniatures and things like that, which we did on Aliens. I knew all the old cheats, the Schuftan shots and the glass paintings and all that, and I used to love it when the effects department of a major studio was called the trick department. Because they were just tricks. They were tricks to the eye. They were trompe-l'oeil and things like that. So all the effects in Aliens are very crude by present standards, very simple and straightforward. Even the Alien Queen was just operated by people. It wasn't even hydraulic. There were off-camera puppeteers, and there were two guys inside the body of the thing operating the arms and and all that.
But between Aliens and The Abyss, you're starting to get that shift, aren't you? And computer generation is coming in a big way.
We had all sorts of wild ideas, like projecting high-speed photography of water onto claymation and animating it frame by frame, all kinds of wacky stuff like that. Some of it probably would have worked just fine, just fine in the end. But it was proposed to me that we try it with computer-generated animation. I knew nothing about that. So I said, all right, show me a test. Show me something that looks even remotely like this. And two different companies, one was ILM with Dennis Muir and the other one was Kleiser-Walzak, both produced a test, and neither one of them really looked that good. But one had the surface texture and the other one had the refraction and the movement. And I thought, if you put that with that, you could maybe do something really interesting. So we kind of took this big leap of faith and went with the computer graphics, and I went with Dennis Murin at ILM, and he and I became friends over the subsequent years, and he worked on Terminator 2, of course, too, which is the natural through line of that process.
It's really interesting the way that computer generation evolves. So it was water at that stage, and subsequently, obviously, it's been sand or fur
Yes,
or
right,
whatever.
yeah.
And then you suddenly find that a whole crop of films will come out at that time where everybody's showing that they can do this. But this,
Yes.
presumably, The Abyss was really early on in the whole water thing.
Yeah, I can place it exactly. There was a movie called Young Sherlock Holmes that had a CG character, the stained glass knight, but he was a hard surface model and he was just these floating panes of glass. But the first time anybody had seen a soft surface model, and especially a human face that was animated, and Mary Elizabeth's face when on the pseudopod sticks out her tongue, and so there's it just sort of took it up to a higher level.
But just to remind people, again, for the setup for The Abyss, it's a nuclear sub, goes down in mysterious circumstances, and then this crew are brought in to salvage it, to salvage the wreck. But there's great potential for tension within the crew.
That stuff was so expensive that the CG, you can see it's like all reaction shots. When the pseudopod comes into the room, one character reacts, then another, then another, then another, then another, then another. Finally, we cut back to the thing, I think there's probably 14 or 15 shots in the whole sequence. They took 9 months to do. And I think in the last 2 months of Avatar, in post-production in Avatar before final delivery, we had 1,000 shots come in.
So obviously The Abyss was a very demanding shoot. I mean, you were actually filming, we saw a little bit there, in a not yet commissioned nuclear facility.
So we're in what would have been the containment vessel of a nuclear reactor. And it was a big tank that held, I think, 7 million gallons.
But I mean, also discussions with the studio about the length of the film, I think. Does that always happen?
Well, I always believe that to create fantasy with a sense of reality, you have to embellish it with a lot of detail, and it's the small detail that makes it feel real to people.
And so that whole idea of the 3-hour film, which you said, I understand that you feel it needs the detail and the space, but do you know whether audiences like that?
The only sort of reference point we had back in those days was Dances with Wolves, which was, which won Best Picture, and it was 3 hours and 10 minutes. But historically, films that length, it just didn't work. And it wasn't until Titanic that we actually had a film that we believed worked at that length. And still everybody was nervous about it, and exhibitors said it wouldn't work, and we got a lot of pushback from the exhibition community, but we went with it anyway.